this is my color right now. You cannot tell me that I can't have another thing in this color. Maybe if I talk about it, I'll want to work on it again. That was intimidating to me. So it seems like I deserved a new cast on.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another podcast episode today. Thank you so much for giving me the space to have the break that I decided to take over the last week. I will say that after falling into a routine over an entire year of never missing a weekend upload and then taking a week off, I feel so out of practice here. So please bear with me if things are not as seamless today as I would like them to be, but I am feeling pretty energized and excited to sit down and talk about my projects. I'll say too that the week off did not really go the way that I had expected it to, and so neither did the progress on the whips that I have. And so I'm eager to sit down and actually see what's been accomplished this week and maybe more importantly, what has not. So I guess over the past 2 weeks. So for a little bit of context, if you are new here, like I said, I'm Nora. I'm coming to you from a small farm in Connecticut, and I've been knitting for just over a year and a half now. I've been doing this podcast for the past year, and the last episode that I had done was my sort of podiversary celebration. I took a week off, and therefore I have fallen off of my typical schedule, which is a weekly upload of every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time, where I love to share and talk about all of my projects. And so this is the very first time I'm ever giving a 2-week update. And yeah, that's just very interesting. I do have a sort of philosophy around my making, which I know with at least one project today we're going to see come into play, which is that the imperfections are what make something so perfectly handmade. I don't think that all of your handmade pieces need to be perfect. In fact, I celebrate those little imperfections to really show the signature that it is something that was made by hand. And so, yeah, if that feels like something that you can get on board with, then I definitely do invite you to come hang out with us more often. You can follow me here as well as over on Instagram at aka Nora Knits. And with all of that out of the way, I think we should go ahead and dive on in. Now, I am going to maybe just present things a little bit differently because of the lapse of time that we've had since the last episode. So let me just start by kind of laying out on the table here everything that we have going on as far as what's on the whips list. I'm going to read this because it's been so long that I don't think I could rattle them off in order the way that I typically would. So the longest standing whip that we have is my Sand Cardigan by Maria Isaeva of Ulan Knitwear. I also have a Tulsa Tank, the fingering weight version by Rebecca Clow of the Crea Bea, as well as the Cordelia skirt by Witchery Design. And then I do have a new cast on, which I'll just hold as a little bit of a surprise element because I think that the majority of today will be discussing that. That also reminds me, super quick, I am wearing my Sailor Swift tank top by Veronica Lindberg. I knit this just a few months ago, and it's actually been one of my most worn pieces since I finished it, which I did find to be a little bit surprising as it is a tank top that I knit in the summer out of some merino wool. It is knit out of Knitting for Olive merino in the colorways brown nougat and cream. And I will definitely link to the Ravelry page down below. I can't remember off the top of my head the size or anything, But I know that I love this project and I'll definitely be making more of them in the future. And I'm looking forward to styling it now the way that I kind of have today with cardigans and blazers on top for the fall. I think that this is a really underestimated and sort of underestimated, underhyped type project, a knit tank top. I definitely see myself making way more of these in the future. So that's kind of exciting. Also, on the topic of tank tops, let's just go ahead and say that the Tulsa tank is not going to be part of the discussion today, as I have not worked on it at all in the 2 weeks since I told you about it. If you don't know, I do kind of treat that as what other people would maybe call their sock knitting. I mean, what would be, they wouldn't call it, it would just be their sock knitting. I'm not much of a sock knitter. And so that Tulsa tank is kind of just taking the place of a sort of sock knitting type project that lives entirely in my purse and is just there for me when I need a little something to knit on while I'm out and about. And so it just didn't see any work over the past 2 weeks. So that's not what we're going to talk about today. Let us go ahead and start with, I actually don't know that this got worked on either, but let's start talking about this sand cardigan by Marie Siva, Ullin Knitwear. I am knitting this ankle length, really cozy sort of loungewear cardigan out of Nora Madara in the colorway 01 Sake. I've been working on this cardigan for way too long, and it's just not getting done. And honestly, it just boils down to the fact that I am in the middle of the double knit button band. And I had started this project way back in the beginning of this year and put it aside for the summer as it just kind of became like too cumbersome to even work on during the warmer months. And then pulling it out and then just being in the middle of the double knit button bands, that is the majority of what needs to be done. And it's something I need to get through before I can confidently move forward with the other couple of elements that still need to be finished. I am just struggling so much to find the determination and inspiration to work on this project when it's just all of kind of the fun stuff is done. And it's just this double knit button bands that's really standing in the way of this project being done. So let's get it up on Miss Helena the Hanger and take a peek on what we've got going on and just assess things. Maybe if I talk about it, I'll want to work on it again. All right, here she is on Miss Helena the Hanger. I am still working on a more long-term solution for something to put on this hanger, so please ignore again the sort of wrinkly shirt that is just helping to make this a little bit more easy to see. But this is my sand cardigan. As of today, it's been on the needles for 214 days. And it's pretty much done. We've got the whole length of this cardigan is knit. What remains to be finished is the double knit button band. You could see on the right side here, I have knit the full double knit button band all the way from the bottom up to the back of the neck. And currently we're actually sitting at about the dead halfway point where you can't see on the back here. I can spin it. Where I have left off, and I do still have the entire left side of the button band to knit. And I said in the last podcast episode that I would have really liked to have been kind of down the left shoulder a little bit. And like I said, it's just kind of not happening. This is not a project that I wish to abandon by any means. I'm really excited to have the finished object. It's just that the double knit button band, I mean, I think anyone who's knit a double knit button band before knows it's quite a laborious process and it's pretty monotonous. And it's hard to see the progress that you're making. And so it kind of just feels never ending at all times. And that's really how this is feeling. But the point of having this cardigan truly was to have it for this fall season. So I'm also just feeling very much like I'm behind, and I'm not going to actually have it for the time I want to wear it. So I'm trying to just reason with myself here and accept the fact that it's going to be done when it's done. It can take as long as it needs to take. What I don't want to do is stop working on it entirely. And so I'm trying to figure out a system for getting the double knitting done on this without feeling like I'm doing it miserably. um so I can see that I've really only made maybe 3 inches of progress on this double knit button band since the last time we spoke. And if that's all that gets done in 2 weeks, that's all that gets done in 2 weeks, and it's better than nothing. So I'm not going to be too hard on myself about it. For today, I will move this progress keeper. And we'll see. Perhaps this needs more of a row a day system, or 10 rows a day system, or 10 minutes a day system, or, double knit button band Tuesdays or something to just ensure that I'm staying consistent. If you have a favorite way to address these sort of begrudging whips, I would like to know what your system is, because I really do feel like I'm trying to stay positive about it and I'm struggling to. Anyway, not to start out with such a bummer, but that's just kind of the reality of the situation. I'm knitting this in the size 5. The pattern suggests that you knit it on 5mm needles. I've knit mine in 4.5mm needles with the different yarn and everything. That's just made the most sense. And it still needs pockets as well as cuffs. And the cuffs, I'm really waiting to be done with the button bands to finish, because I want to make sure that the sleeves are the right length, which I'll only know when it's properly sitting on my shoulders. But the pockets are something I think I could go in and maybe address those if I'm feeling like that will spark a little bit more inspiration for this one. Maybe I just take a day and try to bang out a pocket and see how that goes. I don't know. And right now the double knit button band, which is not actually a button band, it's just a placket, a border out of double knitting. There are no buttons for this cardigan. I'm knitting them on DP ends, on little guys. And I am picking up the button band as I go, because the concept of picking up the entire button band, that was intimidating to me. So that's what I've decided to do. I made a whole tutorial on how to do it. I'll make sure it's linked in the description box below if you're also interested in doing such things. And otherwise, I think that's just kind of where we're at with the sand cardigan. So let's move on from there. All right, now next up in the projects and the order of how long I've been working on them is my Cordelia skirt. This is a huge part of my summer knitting plans that I'm realizing now we're actually done with. I need to get going on fall knitting plans. But this project is part of a set where there is intended to be a matching vest top. And I just started with the skirt. I'm knitting mine out of Drops Belle in the colorways Mint Cream and Black. And this really fun striped skirt has been on my needles for 42 days today. I will actually hold this up the right way today, because I always hold it upside down. Since you do work it from the top down, my needles are actually at the hem of this right now. And here we have her. Really fun little striped number. Clearly I'm having a thing for stripes lately. And I'm sure I could find, here is the progress keeper, that gorgeous one from Miss Sable and Stone, which we will talk about in a couple minutes. So I have managed to get through 1, 2, 3, 4.5 of the contrast stripes over the past 2 weeks. This skirt I am knitting in the size extra large, and I am using a smaller needle than what's recommended in the pattern. So they suggest a 4mm needle. I'm using a 3.75mm needle. I don't know that I've ever mentioned it yet, but this is actually one of the first times I am actually using a suggested yarn for the pattern. So Drop Spell is one of the suggested yarns. Something I do really like about the Witchery designs is that she does mention a sort of slew of different suggested yarns in different price brackets. So that is nice, especially for more beginner knitters who are maybe a little bit more apprehensive about choosing yarns outside of what's suggested. It is nice to have that reassurance of the designer saying, well, like you could use this. So I was very happy. I wanted to use this yarn anyway. I wanted to knit the skirt anyway. So the pairing worked out just very well. And this is another sort of just big knit, something that's supposed to hit down around the ankles. It's a midi skirt. And like I said, it is knit top down. The only thing that I've really changed is the fact that there is a waistband that is to be knit just in plain stockinette on this guy, and it's a folded over waistband. And you're supposed to start the pattern with that and then move on to the rest of the skirt. And she mentions in the pattern, it literally says something like, you might as well just knit the waistband, put it aside, and then sew it onto the rest of the skirt later, which then I figured, let me just start with the skirt, make sure all the sizing seems right, and then I'll come back and knit a waistband separately. But I just started thinking about it a little bit more. Is there a reason why I wouldn't just then pick up stitches for the waistband? Is that a horrible idea? I'm sure that there's some sort of, um, more seamless element or something when it comes to sewing on a waistband rather than just picking up the stitches and going from there. But I think that I might just pick up the stitches because I can then also control a little bit better the rate at which I pick up stitches to make sure that this is fitting as best as it can, since I think I've gone for just a pinch more positive ease in the actual body of the skirt than what's recommended in the pattern. So I may choose to knit my waistband a little bit smaller. Of course, there's also going to be elastic put into the waistband, so that's going to most definitely help this situation. But yeah, I just keep holding it up to myself, and I'll just be sure to insert a clip where I'm holding this up to myself still because it's only around kind of the knee right now, and it really does need to be quite a bit longer for my liking. I do understand that this fabric is most definitely going to be prone to sort of stretching over time. So in the very near future, I'm sure it is due for a block. Perhaps the next time I run out of yarn, I'll just go back and do that waistband so I can have even a better idea of sort of what's going on. Um, but yeah, this project has really been the one that I have been dragging around with me over the past 2 weeks. Um, I definitely thought I would have more progress on it than I do, but um, essentially the timing of the podiversary and therefore a sort of week off coincided with a planned knee replacement surgery for Papa Knits. And that all went to plan. The recovery, however, did not so much. And so that week off of sort of like nothing but knitting turned into not very much of that. But this has been all over the place. It has joined me in the hospital and at my parents' house and all of that in between. So it got a lot of attention when I really did need that mindless stockinette in the round. This also has been my soccer watching knitting, which has been very nice to have. And I am really pushing to get this skirt done in the next couple of weeks so that I could wear it with some sweaters and blazers and things this fall. But for now, it's not exactly where I'd hoped it would be. Let me know what you think about that idea of just picking up the waistband. And in the meantime, why don't I move my beautiful Sable and Stone Progress Keeper? There we go. Now, if you missed last podcast episode, I did mention that we were going to be doing a giveaway with Sable and Stone, who makes these really beautiful knitting notions that she calls jewelry for your knitwear, and I completely agree with. So I have 3 sets of these that are intended to give away to those of you who entered. As of the time I'm filming, it is not the time of the giveaway entries, cutoff. And so I will put on the screen here the 3 winners of the Sable and Stone notions. Thank you so much for everyone who commented and entered. I actually, because of the way that the last couple of weeks have gone, I have saved the comments for a day where I can actually sit down and go through them in a better state of mind. And so I'm looking forward to reading through all of the kind things that everyone had said. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for being here for a year. And thank you so much to Danielle from Sable and Stone for providing these notions for the giveaway. So if you see your name on the screen here, please do email me at akanoraknits@gmail.com so that we can work out getting the prize to you. I also had mentioned that this was going to be limited within the US because of shipping. And so there is also an international winner whose name will also be on the screen here, who will be winning a pattern of their choice. If that's you, please also go ahead and email me and just let me know which pattern and designer on Ravelry you're interested in receiving a free pattern from my gift to you. So thank you so much for everyone who participated in all that, to Danielle, all of that. And genuinely, in a really chaotic and kind of crazy week, having this wonderful mindless knitting, and then also, honestly, you don't realize how much these little notions make the biggest difference. And it's just something fun and really pretty to look at in an otherwise really simple knit. So I've very much grown to love this little progress keeper here. So that is that on the Cordelia skirt. We will put her away for now and let us talk about the new cast on. So this is actually, I guess, a little bit of a sneak preview into my fall knitting plans. I definitely did not expect or plan to start a new project over the past 2 weeks. My goal really was to finish projects. But again, just based on the whole trajectory of the way that things went, I was feeling like the double dip button band was not speaking to me. The mindless knitting was almost a little too mindless, and I needed something that was going to kind of reel in my brain, which was wandering off into all sorts of really not so fun places. And so it seems like I deserved a new cast on. Now, I have had most of the yarn for this project for a little bit now. And even that was actually a shift from some other yarn that I have. Anyway, there's also an acquisition in here. I've got a little more acquisition to talk about later. But I did want to mention that there's this really very just cool moment for me. Like I said, just a rough couple of weeks, and I felt like I deserved a new cast on. I knew it was going to be this cardigan. I have been basically just drooling over it since the pattern was released, and I went to go purchase the pattern for this cardigan to cast it on, at which point I saw that it had actually been purchased for me just the day or two before. It was a really, really sweet and generous gift from a viewer named Sue, who really included a very sweet message. And I have to tell you, when everything was just kind of piling on, and I thought, I'm gonna treat myself, and I'm gonna cast out a new project and buy this new pattern. And then I saw it was already in my library. Tears. It was such just a kind thing to have done, and it just really came in at the perfect time. So thank you so much, Sue. I did message her back and just make sure to let her know how grateful I really am. But it was a very, very nice thing to see at just the right time. So made the whole experience that much more exciting, and I don't know, just better. The whole thing was better. So this is the Beatrix cardigan by Gregoria Fibers. It is this most stunning, all over textured cardigan jacket, kind of. And certainly mine is going to lean a little bit more jacket-like, just because of the yarns and the way that my fabric is turning out. So I actually had purchased yarn back earlier in the year when there was a local yarn shop closing and all of the yarn was on major discount. I had purchased yarn to knit this cardigan specifically. However, I was then at a local thrift store and found a different yarn that's the same color. And I don't know why, it just felt like it was more appropriate for this knit. So that was the Lamb's Pride worsted. This is an 85% wool and 15% mohair blend. It is that single ply, so it has a very rustic nature to it, although I do find it to be very soft. But with that single ply, I think at the time, even when I purchased this, someone had mentioned, be careful, it pills a lot and stuff like that. So I felt like it would make the most sense to hold it with another yarn to just ensure the integrity of the yarn. However, I didn't want to hold it with a fuzzy yarn because this particular project has all of this texture, and I did really want that to stand out. Even though I'm knitting it in a darker color, I didn't want to also overshadow all of the texture with a fuzzy element. So I reached out to everyone on Instagram and asked what your favorite non-fuzzy lace weight yarn was. And one of the suggestions was this Knit Picks Alpaca Cloud lace weight yarn. This is 100% baby alpaca, and they happen to have it in just about the same color. The name of this color is Chocolate Souffle, and the name of this color is Hamlet, right? Didn't I just see that somewhere, or did I just make that up? I think it's called Hamlet. So I decided to hold these two together. I knit up a swatch on the suggested needle size and got stitch gauge, but the row gauge was a little funky, and decided to just proceed with caution. So far, all of that is working out. I'm going to show you the progress that I've made. I did cast this project on 7 days ago today, so it's been on the needles for just a week. And I thought what's kind of cool here is that the Lamb's Pride yarn, I had purchased a bag of this at the thrift store. If I'm not mistaken, I picked up 10 balls of this yarn for a total of $15. And so very cool, very affordable project for me. And then adding in the lace weight yarn was, I feel like, that much more justifiable just because of the price that I paid for this. And the thing is that the other yarn I had purchased to knit this project, again, it was actually this same color, which is just, if this is my color right now, you cannot tell me that I can't have another thing in this color. But it was a superwash wool. And I just felt like what I didn't want was for this cardigan to have a ton of drapiness to it. And I really wanted something more jacket-like, which I am getting out of this fabric. again, here is a swatch. You can even see here, while it does have this sort of squishability to it, it is a rather sturdy and structural sort of fabric. When I hold it up, it can stand on its own. So I am getting the exact fabric that I wanted here. The only other thing I thought I would touch on is that while these shades from afar, and maybe to just most people, this would look like they're the exact same shade. However, the Lamb's Pride chocolate souffle, this is truly your dark chocolate. That's really the color. The thing with chocolate is that it usually has a sort of violety undertone to it. And this, in the light, you can definitely see those red and violet undertones. Whereas with the alpaca cloud, this yarn has more of a sort of olive undertone to it. So while they're both this really dark brown shade, that slight difference in tone, I think, is helping to enhance the whole texture of this cardigan, which is just also something that I think is very cool. If you are also someone who likes the idea of having a textured knit and a darker color, and you're not into a like marled or heathered look, even just having that slight differentiation between the two strands of the undertone, it can make a really big difference to make that texture pop. All right, enough rambling. Let us get the Beatrix cardigan on Miss Helena the Hanger. So clearly, this is where my attention has been. Like I said, this has been on the needles for 7 days today. I am knitting this cardigan in the size 5. It's being knit up on 5mm needles, which is the suggested needle size. Though I do think, like I said, I feel like I'm getting a bit more of a dense fabric than probably is recommended, but I'm very happy with the fabric that I'm getting. Now, this cardigan is very interesting to me. It's a brand new construction for me. So this is my first time knitting a saddle shoulder. And I always kind of guesstimated how saddle shoulders work, and it's not far off from what I had thought. But basically, the way that this all works up is that you cast on actually a long sort of cast on. And then the last few stitches of that cast on kind of wind up being these panels that sit on top of the shoulders. So you cast on one long chain, and then they kind of turn those outside just last few stitches, however many make up the width of the saddle shoulder. And you knit down each shoulder saddle patch portion, leave those live stitches on some try-it-on tubing, and then go back, pick up stitches across what's now the back shoulder portion, so the back of those saddle shoulder little strips. You pick up your stitches along the way and start knitting down. And this pattern does include some German short rows to add some shaping to the back of the neck. Once you've knit down your way to the underarm, very typical fashion, you then pick up the front of the saddle shoulder and knit down the front. Now, let's break this down a little bit because I was pleasantly surprised by the way that this is all constructed for a few reasons. So, one of the really fun parts about this cardigan is that the saddle shoulder includes this gorgeous, chunky braided cable. And because of the way that the saddle shoulder is worked up, it's really fun that that feature follows from the neck all the way down the sleeves to the end of the to the wrist. So I think that's really, really fun. I love that feature about it. But it was nice because you were able to get into a little groove for just that saddle shoulder section, knitting up that cable, knitting up that braid without having to worry about multiple different charts or anything. It's just all you're doing is that cable. So it's very quick to get on board with what's going on, knit up that little patch, knit up the next one. That took an evening, like lickety split, done. Then coming into the texture of the back of the cardigan, like I said, you pick up those stitches and you're working the German short rows, which are beautifully explained in this pattern. This is my first time knitting anything from Gregoria Fibers, but I've had a few of her patterns on my queue in my favorites, and other pattern roundups that I've done. So I've been eyeing her patterns for a long time, and I'm pleasantly surprised by how nicely this is all laid out. So the German short rows were beautifully explained, and then knitting that texture down the back with just, the standard kind of sleeve shaping and stuff was very easily well explained in the pattern. This texture, we can isolate to that for a second. That is what the swatch is knit up from. And you can see here, it has a lot of bounce and stretch in the width. So this is the width, and then this is the length, or the rows and the stitches and the rows. So it creates overall a sort of like waffle stitch feature. It's a very graphic kind of design where there are these just tiny little dashes kind of running along. I had no idea how that was going to be created. And it's essentially like every couple of stitches, you are casting on a new stitch and then binding off a couple of stitches. So if you're familiar with a traditional bind off where you sort of knit a stitch, knit another stitch, and then scoop up the first one and kind of drop it off over that second one. That's pretty much what's happening for the entirety of this pattern. So it's very mindless as far as you don't have to keep referring back to a chart. You know exactly what's happening. And the backside is just purling. So when it gets to the sleeves and the rounds, it'll be knitting on that wrong side row. But it's a very intuitive pattern that requires thought, but not thinking. It requires you being engaged, but without having to follow a chart and cross things off. So again, that was like the exact part of my brain that needed to be tickled over the past week. And boy, did I've just absolutely loved that. Clearly, I've been addicted. Now, got to that underarm point, came time to cast on those pick up new stitches for the front panels. And in the design, you see that down the button placket edge of this, there are some really pretty little cable details. And so I was actually feeling a little bit like I was dreading that part of knitting the front of this, because now I thought, okay, this is where I'm going to have to put in some stitch markers and start separating where the cable starts and the texture begins. And I'm going to have to be following a chart to make sure I'm cabling at the right time. And then I discovered that all of the button placket cabling, all of that is an afterthought. It's all a step that comes once you've finished knitting down the cardigan. Once you finish knitting these panels, those cables are all part of like picking up stitches and knitting a button placket. So the front panels were just as simple as the back, just continuing the stitch pattern that's been going the whole time. At that point, it was so intuitive and so mindless. I just got lost in the whole thing, and here we are. I mentioned before that in my swatch, my row gauge was off a little bit. I believe that I have my row gauge is a little bit taller than what it should be. So my like 4x4 swatch is actually something more like a 4x4.5 swatch. So I thought that was going to affect things negatively in the fit, but I tried it on as I went, and so far so good. I have not modified the pattern at all. So where I'm at right now is that you could see here. So these are those saddle shoulders sitting on hold. I have connected in the round in the flats under the arms, and I think I've just hit about the halfway point of what she suggests for rows in the body. Now, I'm going to kind of disregard what is said in the pattern, and I will try this on and make sure that it's hitting me where I want it to hit me. The bottom of the whole thing does finish with a couple inches of ribbing, so I have that in the back of my head too. And so I did figure we could kind of toss this on and just take a peek at the way that it's fitting. But right now, I am just absolutely adoring this project. The chunky needles, of course, make this very quick to knit up. The two yarns together are creating this really lovely rustic looking, um, very traditional looking fabric. It has a real nice kind of fuzziness to it, as in it just has a woolly look to it, but it's not actually a mohair fuzzy. I mean, there's mohair in it. You know what I mean. So I don't know. Overall, I'm very pleased with everything that's happening. I think the only thing that I will say is that the swatch, when I pull it apart, there is nothing that fills in the gaps that are created from the way that the stitch pattern is done. So I think that when I block the overall garment, I might try and just let it soak a little bit longer. I soaked this a typical like 20 minutes or so, and then blocked this as per usual. But I think that I might let the overall garment soak a little bit longer with the hopes that the fibers will kind of fluff up a little bit more, being that it is that single ply. Maybe that will help. And then the only other thing that I wanted to make sure I noted was that the Lamb's Pride yarn it's been really fine to work with. Like, it's not splitty or anything. However, the ball that I was working on most recently, there were so many knots in the yarn. I mean, across the skein, there were probably 4 or so, which just seems like a lot when you're going. I have been spit splicing the Lamb's Pride, the alpaca. Can you spit splice alpaca? I didn't even think to try. But I've only had to join in yarn for the alpaca once so far, as the single skein does get you very far. There's something like 400 yards on a skein of that. So yeah, okay, let's get this on. Now, seeing it in the try-on clips, you might see I'm kind of tugging the whole thing down a little bit, because I did find that my swatch before and after blocking did do a bit of growing. Again, just like the nature of the stitch pattern, I think there's a lot of like accordionness in the whole thing. And so I am anticipating the armhole specifically to just be a little bit lower, and I can tell that when I tug it down a little bit, I am getting that. So yeah, I think that I don't want this to be a cropped piece, as in I don't want it to be a cardigan that just comes up to the top of my like high-waisted jeans. I really do want this to hit just before the widest part of my hips. And I think too, because it is a round neck cardigan, this is my first time actually knitting a round neck cardigan. I imagine I'm most of the time going to be wearing it like either all the way buttoned up or not buttoned at all. I can't imagine I would button it like halfway and then leave the top open. That kind of bothers me a little bit. So that's part of why I was happy to treat this more as a jacket than a cardigan, just based on those ways that I would kind of wear it. But yeah, I'm so excited about this project. It was exactly what I needed at just the right time. I'm so obsessed with this color right now. And I think that was kind of everything that I had to say about it. So yeah, at this moment in time, she's probably about right that I'm at that like halfway mark of how much of the texture to knit before moving on to the ribbing. I'll have to just read ahead in the pattern a little bit and see how many inches of ribbing she suggests, because I like the proportion of it in the original design. And so I'll have to see, okay, let's take a peek at that, and then maybe measure a couple other jackets and stuff to see how long I want this. And I'll just make it a point to knit the texture to about, that point that I come up with. But really having fun with it. I think that as far as construction goes with the saddle shoulder, there's something that really makes you want to keep going versus, I mean, a raglan is such a simple construction because you're starting out with the whole neckline and then just increasing. So you're really seeing the whole thing develop in front of you. A drop shoulder is a little bit more cumbersome and like you have to kind of fight through it a little bit more just because you're starting out typically with that like trapezoid shape across the back. It doesn't look like anything for a long time. You don't get any immediate satisfaction from a drop shoulder. And then a circular yoke, very similar to that raglan. Again, you're like seeing it all come together, but it's taking so long. Whereas the saddle shoulder, you get instant gratification from these little patches that you start with, and then going in and picking up the back, and then that comes together really quickly, and then picking up the front, and it's kind of you're cheating the way down a little bit because that saddle shoulder covers a lot of ground on the top. I don't know. It was a very satisfying construction. And definitely I will be keeping an eye out for more saddle shoulder patterns in the future. That did remind me. I mentioned at the beginning that the whole imperfections are what makes something so perfectly handmade would play a role in one of the projects. And this is the one. I only noticed, I think yesterday, I was knitting on this and I just was like admiring my work, at which point I saw that it's this one. I'll have to put a close up, but in the saddle shoulder patch portion, I don't know what happened, but clearly I purled a couple of stitches that were supposed to be a knit and had just did not even see it. Did not even know about it until yesterday. And that's the first thing that happens. So I've been looking at these saddle shoulders for a full week now and only noticed that I made that mistake yesterday, which also just goes to show you no one else is going to see it. Yeah, really, really happy with this one. I'm so looking forward to having this for the fall. And like I said, I guess that's just a little sneak peek into my fall knitting plans. So that is the Beatrix cardigan by Gregoria Fibers, and it's been on my needles for 7 days today. So those are the whips that I am working on currently. I definitely want to just make sure that I'm setting all of my expectations right. You know, the sand cardigan, we all need to accept at this point that it's just getting done when it gets done. That Tulsa tank, it just gets worked on when it needs to get worked on. It is the lowest of priority knits for me. The Cordelia skirt, I do really want to get wrapped up, but I don't see it being an issue because it's been my dependable in the round knitting. So, you know, when it comes to wanting that mindless in the round knitting, I have the option of the Cordelia skirt and the Tulsa tank. And the Cordelia skirt is just so much more higher priority. I'm more eager to get that in my closet. So it definitely is going to be worked on. I imagine over the next week, the Cordelia skirt and the Beatrix cardigan are going to be sort of neck and neck as they inch their way to becoming finished objects before everything else. So yeah. Now, like I said, the little break did not go according to plan. I had every intention of filming my fall knitting plans during that time. Didn't get to it. So the goal is going to be to get to it within the next week. And good thing because I've just been itching to talk about my fall knitting plans. One of which I have purchased the yarn for. So I purchased that Knit Picks alpaca cloud lace. Part of me choosing that as the second strand to hold with the Lamb's Pride was the fact that I was already eyeing some other Knit Picks yarn. And so as far as, you know, shipping costs and things, it just made the most sense to go with that one since I was already looking at this other yarn. And I mean, just clearly there's a color theme happening here. So the other yarn that I picked up for a future fall knitting plan is the Knit Picks Wonder Fluff Bulky Weight. This is in the colorway Espresso Heather, and it is 70% baby alpaca, 23% nylon, 7% merino wool. It is one of those chainette styles of yarn, I believe. It's almost so packed with fluff that it's a little bit hard to tell, but yes. So I'm guessing that you have a little mesh tube here that's made out of the nylon, and then it is packed full of the baby alpaca and the merino wool, which gives the whole ball of yarn. This weighs nothing. This single ball is a 50-gram ball and it's 142 yards. So it creates this very lofty, very lightweight fabric. Now, if you look up this Wonder Fluff at all, I feel like the reviews are so mixed. Another one that I put up on my Instagram to see what other people felt about it, and the reviews are just all over the place. The number one thing that people say is that they did find that it pills quite a bit. And for me, sometimes there's just going to be projects that pill. My fall knitting plans for this, I'm going to save for the fall knitting plans, but the garment that I intend to knit with it, I don't imagine being the most worn thing in my wardrobe. And so hopefully it doesn't get too beat up. But I am looking forward to knitting with this. So yes, I purchased this at the same time that I had purchased this, and they were not intended for the same project, but of course, this is all just this same color that I'm really loving right now and feeling like I could use more of in my wardrobe. As far as first glance, it's just about the softest thing I've ever felt. I did actually already knit up the swatch for that fall knitting plan, and I have no idea where I put it. So I'm going to have to track that down for that video at least. But a huge box showed up here full of a whole bunch of these guys. And then I purchased 4 of these at the same time. So I'll save all of the costs and stuff breakdown, but I think that at the time I had purchased all of this, another kind of enticing factor was that they were having a sale, or I was able to get a coupon code or something for 20% off. So kind of sold me on the whole thing. So yeah, those are my acquisitions. I will say too that there is more yarn coming in. I'll be doing a test knit. I'll talk about that in the fall knitting plans. So the yarn for that is on its way in. So yeah, there's a lot of things coming in, projects kind of all over the place, but I'm eager to sit down and do the fall knitting plans to really get my ducks all in a row. And also because a lot of my fall knitting plans include some deadlines. And so I have to definitely lay all of that out on a calendar and make sure I'm giving myself enough time to get these things done. Eek. And yeah, I think that is everything today. Like I said, if your name's on the screen, please be sure to email me as you have won a giveaway. Also, just a quick reminder, I did have some issues over the past couple of weeks with some scam bots in the comments telling people that they won things, and I felt really horrible because I had quite a few emails reaching out. And I want to make it so clear here that anytime I do a giveaway, I will be the person saying in a video in my description box who won the giveaway. I will never comment saying that you've won anything, and I certainly will never ask you for any personal information or details. I don't know why the scam bots do what the scam bots do, but they do it. And so just please remember that in the future, anytime I have a giveaway, I will always announce the winners in a video or in the description box. And those are the only 2 places I will ever say someone won something. So please be careful with that and just report those comments if you see them, because they're not me. And with all that being said, if you enjoyed this video, I would definitely appreciate it if you would go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you subscribe and ring the bell, you'll be notified anytime I post a new video. However, I do post podcast videos just like this one every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And with all that, you guys, a big ol' thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. All right, you guys. Bye.